Hi there, I'm Cole Perkins with PRECO Electronics, and joining us today is Craig with the Municipality of Anchorage Solid Waste Services. And today we're going to go over the installation process of the PreView Sentry, the PreView Side Defender 2, and the PreView V2 display. Now here before you we have all the contents of the kit that will go on the truck. This is the PreView Sentry radar sensor. We have its mounting hardware. We have the mounting bracket for the sensor and the brackets mounting hardware. Here we have the body harness for the sensor that will get it up to the display. Here we have the PreView Side Defender 2 sensor and its mounting hardware. And here is this Side Defender 2's transition cable. We have a Y cable that will connect the transition cables together up to the display. We have here a breakout cable that provides the CAN high and low and an auxiliary out, which those three we won't be using with this setup. We will be using the reverse signal from this breakout cable. We also have here the PreView V2 display. This is a G2000 which uses GPS to provide the vehicle speed and the GPS antenna. This is also the mounting hardware for the V2 display and an adhesive for the antenna itself. It also includes the documentation with the user manual for the devices as well as a wiring diagram and sensor placement guide.
Are you ready to install it?
Let's get it done.
All right.
Today we're going to be installing the PreView object detection system on this Labrie front loader refuse truck. We'll go over the sensor placement, the wire routing, and then we'll get into the finer details of the installation. So let's get started. So we're going to want to start out with placing the sensors. Now we're going to start with the PreView Sentry radar sensor, and you'll want to mount it as center in the vehicle as possible, and it has mounting recommendations of 3 feet from the ground with a tolerance of plus or minus 1 foot. So we're going to look to place this sensor as centered as we can in the back of this truck. Next we'll want to look at routing the harness. For this front loader, we'll be routing the cable up along the tailgate and then back down to go along the chassis up into the cab. Next we'll look at the Side Defender 2. The sensor placement for the Side Defender 2 is critical. We recommend for optimal performance that the sensor be located anywhere from 167 to 187 inches from the front bumper and a mounting height from the ground of 22 to 28 inches. A bracket will more than likely need to be fabricated to allow the sensor to extend out past any of the equipment along the side of the truck to have a clear view. For the cable harness, we'll be routing the harness back along the chassis, following the harness from the Sentry sensor up into the cab. Before we start on the installation, the final thing we want to do is decide the location for the PreView V2 display. Typically you would like to have the display mounted in a location where the driver or operator can see it in his peripherals without having to turn his head to locate the display or see what it's reporting. For this front loader truck, we've decided to locate the display either up near the camera monitor or here near the A-pillar mount of the driver's side door. Once we get the PreView V2 display location, we'll then want to determine a location for the GPS antenna. Typically you want the GPS antenna to have a clear view of the sky, but as you can see with the front loader truck, it has an overhang over the cab. So we've decided a location that is close to this existing GPS antenna that will allow for a decent view of the sky. The GPS antenna is critical so that it reports the vehicle speed so the Side Defender 2 sensor can distinguish between stationary and moving objects. We're going to go ahead and get started with the installation process. For the PreView Sentry sensor, we won't be using the included bracket. Instead, we'll be mounting right on the back of the tailgate, and to help in the aid of the mounting the sensor, we have a drill template that we'll be using. It provides the hole sizes so you know what size of drill bits to use. We want to keep it below a lip on the other side.
Yeah, because there's
Approximately 36 inches plus or minus a foot, and that'll put us the center of the sensor at 39 inches, so we're good. So we're going to route this cable. There's a channel that runs up the tailgate that will allow us to run the harness up over the pivot point of the tailgate. So Craig's up there. He's been removing the cover so we can run some fish tape down to this opening here, where we will then remove the connector from this harness so we can fish the cable down the channel in the tailgate. So the harness is going to be fed down through this opening here where there's already camera harnesses that are routed. In order to remove the pins from this Deutsch connector, we'll need to get in here and remove the wedge, the green wedge. Once we get the green wedge removed, we'll then need to, there's little tabs in there that hold the pins in place. So we'll just separate the tab from the pin, and then we can pull the wire out. Now you'll want to take a picture of where the pins are located so that you're able to locate them in the right position. Pin 1 always starts with power, then ground, then can high, can low, your display power, and the brown wire is your display ground. Now that we've got the pins removed, we'll get them taped up and connected to the fish tape, and we're going to pull it up through the channel. Removing the connector will allow for the harness to be fed up through. With the connector still on there, it will more than likely get jammed and it won't feed. Okay, Craig?
Yes, sir.
You can go ahead and pull it on up. So the cable length for this harness is 75 feet, and it will require 2 people to make sure you get the harness fed up through without getting caught. Once we get this fed through, we'll then loop back down over the pivot point up top and run it back or towards the front of the cab. Okay, that's good. So again, we want to leave about a foot service loop for if we need to remove the sensor. We're going to go ahead and secure this harness with the camera harness here and the brake lights, and then we'll get the sensor connected. Now, when connecting the sensor to its harness with this Deutsch connector, this rubber seal can make it difficult to make sure the connection is secure. So once you make the connection, there are 2 tabs that you'll want to hear each one click. So there should be 2 clicks, and the tab should pop out. Then you know the connection is secure. Now that we've got the sensor connected to its harness, we'll put the cover back on and continue routing the cable.
And that's all there is to it up here.
Now that we've got the harness routed up the tailgate over this pivot point here, we're now going to route the cable down along with the rest of the harnesses down to the chassis. So we're going to go ahead and get this harness zip tied down. Before I get too far down, thank you. For the Labrie front loader refuse truck, this is a typical routing for the harness for the rear sensor, the Sentry sensor. Fish this cable down through the channel here, and there's another little opening right down here, so we kind of have to get a bend in there. Using the fish tape is very helpful. Now that we got the cable fed through this junction here, we're going to go ahead and feed it down across the fender here using the fish tape. Now we're going to go ahead and run the harness up along the chassis with the factory wiring harnesses. And to make that easier, we've raised the box up to allow us access to the chassis. We want to make sure the harness is routed down below the chassis where the box was set on. So we're making sure we're just running under any cross members. When you're routing the harnesses, you also want to make sure that you're not routing along any heat sources, such as the exhaust. It can be in close proximity, but not up against it. This current bracket here provides a good location for us to fabricate a bracket to mount the sensor off of. We want the sensor to extend out past any other equipment so it has a clear view. And Craig has already gone ahead and fabricated a bracket here, and we've chosen this location. As you can see, Craig's already drilled a couple holes. So what we'll do is we'll be attaching the fabricated mount, and this will extend it out past all the equipment, and it's not wider than the tires are. Go ahead and get this mounted, and then we can run the harness. When you're fabricating the bracket, one thing you'd want to keep in mind is the rigidity of the bracket itself. The bracket that Craig fabricated here is very solid. You smack it, it doesn't bounce around. To give you an example of a mount or somewhere that you would not like to mount the sensor, you can refer to this fender here. As you hit it, you see how it vibrates. For the side defender 2, you need to have a solid mount. Otherwise, it can see a stationary object as moving if the mount it is on is vibrating as the vehicle's idling or moving around. Now that we got the side defender 2 sensor mounted, we'll then be running the harness. We're going to route the harness back along the tanks here. We'll have to run underneath the chassis over to the other side where we'll meet up with the other sensor's harness. And then we'll follow on up into the cab. So we ran the body harnesses for both sensors along the chassis, up along underneath the cab where the engine is located, and through a hole in the cab we have the Y cable is feeding down in, that's plugging into both body harnesses. We have from the side defender 2's body harness the wiring for ignition power and ground and the right turn signal. Since the side defender 2 is on the right side, we'll be connecting to the corresponding turn signal. From the Sentry's body harness, we have power and ground feeding through this black flex loom that will also connect to ignition power and ground. Now the shorter cable of the Sentry's body harness is what was routed up to the cab. The other end of that shorter body harness for the Sentry, the 6-pin Deutsch connector, will plug in right back here behind the mud flap. And in order to connect that, we'll now need to connect the mating in of the 6-pin Deutsch connector. We can go through that real quick. So you'll want to start with the red wire power, and that goes to pin 1. There'll be labels on the end of the plug. Pin 1's the top left, and that's where I'll start. And these just push on through until they click. And they should not pull out once they're in place. Next is black, ground to pin 2. Then we have can high. It's pin 3, the yellow wire. Can low, the orange wire goes to pin 4. Display power, which is the green wire, goes to pin 5. Then finally display ground, the brown wire, pin goes into 6. Once you get those in place, we can then insert the green wedge. So that'll just push right in and snap into place. Just to make sure it is in all the way. Just give it a little push, we're good to go. Now I'm going to route this underneath the chassis to plug into the mating end of the harness. And we'll just push into place and you should hear a click. All right. As you can see, we've got a lot of extra body harness left over. So what we've done is we've made sure to bring it back to an area where we can bundle it up that it's not going to be in the way of any moving parts. So we've secured it both up high and down low to keep it in place. Now that we've got the harnesses all ran, we can get to doing the wiring. So let's get started on that. We've got the body harnesses connected to the Y cable. We've zip tied the wires to the Y cable and to the breakout cable. The breakout cable has 4 wires, has a blue, light blue for reverse, which is the only wire we'll be using. The other wires, the yellow, green, and white, will not be used, so we've cut them off, insulated the ends. The auxiliary out provides a signal that can trigger any external device. When active, it's a switch to ground. For this setup, we won't be using that, and for more information on the auxiliary out, please contact PRECO Electronics. Now that we've got everything, all the harnesses pulled through, we're going to go ahead and continue with the wiring. With these connectors, it's a twist lock. So once you get these connected, there is a key that they'll only insert one way. Continually to turn the cover until it clicks in place, and you'll feel it and it will no longer rotate anymore. So the first step in the wiring is determining where we can access the reverse signal and right turn signal, as well as ignition, power, and ground. So we're going to get started on that. All right, so we've got the power and ground from both body harnesses ran up through the console and up into this here. There's a connector here for power and ground. We've added a 5-amp fuse, which will be plenty sufficient for the PreView object detection system. So I've got both ignition wires, power ignition wires connected, and both ground wires connected. The power wires will just be plugging onto a tab here, and then the ground, I'll be removing this nut to secure it along with the other ground that's already there. We're able to determine where to connect the reverse. We were looking to connect it in the console here, which if you were to refer to the manual, you would be able to find that. Due to the ease of connection, we knew that the reverse wire for the camera system was up inside of here, so we went ahead and chose that to be able to connect the reverse. The turn signal, we're also looking to, you can also find it in the console here, but we've decided for ease, we're going to go ahead and route and connect to the lamp itself. We went ahead and verified first, before we connect the turn signal, that we're getting the proper voltage. For the turn signal, for this system, we need it to go from an off-on state of 0 volts to at least 8 to 12 volts. Once we get this all buttoned up, we'll get to the turn signal. For the reverse wire, where it entered the cab, we've gone up through the console here, and we're going to follow the camera cables up into the console up above. All right, here we have the turn signal that came from the body harness, the sensor's body harness, from the side defender 2 sensor. We route the wire, turn wire, up through the console, and because it does come a little short to get us to the turn lamp, we ran the other wire, the extension wire, to this point in the console, and we'll connect these two together. That will connect our turn signal to the turn lamp. So what Craig has done, he's fabricated a little bracket for the GPS antenna. We're going to take the GPS antenna cable and run it through that existing hole there in the cab so we don't have to drill a new one. We'll then route the GPS antenna cable down along the A-pillar into the dash to where it will plug into the display. We've got the display set up here. We ran the harness through an opening here for a switch, provided an easy access. We'll mount the display here next to the monitor was the place we've chosen based on the operator's input, which is a good idea to get before you mount any of the displays. We also ran the GPS harness down through the A pillar and down along into the dash. And what we'll do is we'll just be connecting the GPS to the PreView V2 display. We'll then be able to clean up the wiring harnesses and hide them a little bit better. So I'll go ahead and get started on connecting the turn signal and we'll go from there. The turn signal wire was a little short, so we added an extension to get us through to the turn signal lamp here. And with probing around with a tester, we identified the red wire is the power for the turn signal. So now that we got this all wired up, we can button it back up and do some testing. All right, we've got everything connected now. Now is the test to make sure everything is wired and we got prop power. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the system on, and we'll see the blue LEDs circle around. That means it's looking for, there's more than one sensor connected, and it's looking for all the sensors. You can't quite see it, but there's a status LED just to the right of this acknowledge volume button. It should be illuminated green when it's powered up. These LEDs, amber yellowish colored LEDs, 2 on each side, is indicating that the system is missing vehicle speed. That we're currently in a shop that we're not getting good GPS signal. So once we pull this out, let it sit out in clear open sky, that air should go away and we'll be ready to test. And in fact, it went away. So we have no indications on the detection LEDs. It means we have a clear field. So we'll go outside and do some testing. Now that we've got the system up and operational, now it's time to do a test. What we're going to start out with first is a Sentry sensor. What I'm going to do is a detection pattern test. This will outline the detection pattern of the sensor's detection zone. To begin, I'm going to start out of the detection zone so it's not reporting any detections. We've got an operator in the seat to signal when we get a detection. And since I won't be able to see him, we've also included Craig to signal to me when there's a detection so I can place a cone. So to start out, I'm going to walk straight bore sight at the sensor, walk in towards it until it reports it has detected me. In order for the Sentry sensor to report detections, it does need to be in reverse. Driving forward, the Sentry sensor is not going to be reporting. Now that I've got the length of the detection pattern, I'm going to step to either side and get the width. Okay, head over to the other side. You want to Okay. So the Sentry sensor is very configurable. Right now we have the detection length set at 15 foot and currently the detection width is set at 10 foot. So now I'm going to do the sides and I will start up near the back of the truck. Got that side done, now on to the other side. that one. So we've completed the detection pattern test. What I'm going to do now is test the zones of the Sentry sensor. The Sentry sensor has 5 zones of detection. Zone 1 is the closest to the sensor, that's a critical zone. Zone 5 is the furthest away. Zone 5 will begin at the edge of the detection zone, which, as I mentioned before, is currently set at 15 foot. What I'll do is I'll start at bore sight and walk towards the sensor. They will signal to me when the display changes zones of detection. So as I walk towards it, it will pick me up in zone 5 first, and as I continue to walk in, it will increase in its zones to 4, 3, 2, and eventually 1. So that's zone 5. Zone 4. Zone 3. So that gives you an idea of the 5 zones of detection. I'll walk through them. It's picking me up in zone 5 all the way till this cone. Now it's picking me up in zone 4. As I get closer, I'm now in zone 3, zone 2, and now zone 1. As you'd see on the display for zone 5 will report the LEDs will be lit up blue at the bottom of the display. As I come closer to zone 4, they'll turn yellow. Zone 3, they'll stay yellow. Zone 2, it'll be alternating yellow and red. Zone 1 is red. There's also an audible alert. The audible alert will increase in frequency the closer you get. Where this truck's going to be operating in close quarters, the customer has requested the detection pattern of this Sentry sensor be 15 foot in length, or 4 meters by 10 foot wide, or 3 meters. So what we'll look at is just the approximation of the detection pattern here. We've laid a tape measure out, and right here we got a width of 10 foot from side to side. Now we'll take a look at from the sensor to the end of the detection zone. So if we look here, measuring from the Sentry sensor to the end of the detection zone, we're right at 15 foot, give or take a couple of inches. So the detection pattern's looking good per what the customer's requested. The detection zones are looking good. So what we're going to do now is demonstrate the Sentry sensor as it's backing towards an object. As you can see, we've placed this garbage can in the way, and Craig's using the sensor to back towards the garbage can. I can hear the audible alerts going off right now. All right, now it's time for the Side Defender 2 detection pattern test. What I'm going to do is very similar to with the Sentry, and I'm going to outline the detection pattern. So as I walk into the detection pattern, they're going to signal to me when I'm detected so I can place a cone. The Side Defender 2 does not have 5 zones of detection like the Sentry. It only has 1. So we won't be doing any zone detections, just the detection pattern. Let's get started. I'm going to start at the center of the sensor again, walk directly towards it, and they'll flag me when to place a cone. Okay. Now I'm going to also go to either side of the sensor to get the width. The detection length of the Side Defender 2 is approximately 10 feet, which would be close to 1 adjacent lane. Okay, so we've reached the end of the detection on this end. I'll go to the other side now. Okay, that side's done. Now I'm going to go this way. Woo. We've got this side done, now we'll do the back side. And now we have the detection pattern for the side defender 2. So what we're going to do now is show you how the side defender 2 will ignore stationary objects. As a truck drives by these stationary parked trucks, it should ignore them, and as I walk out, it should detect me. Did it get me? Okay, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to walk through the detection pattern, and you're going to see how large of a blind spot there is even with the rear view mirror. Here we go. Okay, the testing we were doing before was with the turn signal engaged. The turn signal provides an audible alert when there's an object detected. What we're going to do now is do the same test but without the turn signal engaged, so you'll see how it reports a little differently and it does not provide an audible alert.